today's video we are going to be looking at the 5-year financial statement of Access Corp, so that after this video you will then understand if it's something you want to go into or not. Now we're going to be doing from 2022 to 2026. So we'll be looking at money, the debt, and their profit. All right, so this will help you decide if you still want to invest in Access Bank, through Access Corp. Then it will also help you know whether the company is actually growing or it's not growing at all. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to this channel if you are interested in learning how to invest. Now, first of all, let's look at the total assets. It talks about those things, the assets that the company own. So in the year 2022, they had 341 billion naira, and in 2023 they had 674 billion, and then in 2024 they had a total of 1.21 trillion naira, and also in 2025 they also had 1.27 trillion naira, and in 2026 they also had 1.27 trillion naira. So that means they've actually been doing very, very well over the years. So the company has almost quadrupled its total assets. So that means there's a big expansion in Access Corp. So this actually means that there's more power and more business capacity. Now the second thing I'm going to be talking about is their liabilities. That means what they owe to others. All right, you know what liabilities mean, what the business own to others, their debt, that's what it means. Now let's check whether the company owes. So in 2022 they were owing 90 billion naira, and also in 2023 they were owing 420 billion, and in 2024 they were also owing 690 billion, and also in 2025 they also owned 630 billion naira, and in 2026 they also owned 602 billion naira. So these are some of the the debt, like what they are owing also. So it means that their debt actually increased and also became so huge. But if you look at 2026, you know that their liabilities dropped a little bit. So that means they actually borrowed some money, huge sum of money, but after some time their debt started coming down gradually. So the third one I'm going to be talking about is shareholder equity. So this also means real value for investors. So this means what the shareholders, what they own after the company has removed its debt. All right, so in 2022 they owned 250 billion naira. In 2023 they owned 253 billion naira. So, and also in 2024 they also owned 598 billion. So in 2025 they also owned 644 billion naira, and in 2026 they owned 675 billion naira. This is actually a good news because the shareholder, what they own right now, their value has actually doubled in the recent years. Now Access Corp is not just growing, but they're actually building real value for investors, and this is actually a very, very good positive sign. So the next thing, which is the fourth one we're going to be talking about, is their profit. Now profit basically means how much they make. All right, so that's what we're talking about. So in 2022 they actually made 31 billion naira. That's as part of their profit. In 2023 they also made 59 billion naira, and also in 2024 they also made about 80 billion naira, and also in 2025 they also made about 155 billion naira. So you see, these guys are making a lot of profit. Then in 2026 they also made 9.8 billion naira. So in 2026 they have some kind of drop there, significant drop. So this could mean accounting adjustment, maybe restructuring, or stuff like that. So now this is one of the reasons why before you invest, don't just look at one particular year. All right, make sure to compare it with multiple years, with different years. You see, where I started from. Now we're going to be talking about their earnings per share, which is EPS. So this basically means the profit that each share earns. So in 2022 it was 89 kobo, and then also in 2023 it was 168 kobo. In 2024 it was 209 kobo. In 2025 it was 292 kobo. All right, but in 2026 it became 8 kobo. we see that there's a very huge drop, in 2026. This could mean so many things. Maybe they are trying to restructure, they have some kind of accounting changes, in assets. With this EPS, investors, they're able to know if their shares are, actually becoming more valuable. So finally, from what we have seen, it means that their company assets, they actually grew very huge, and also but debt also increased. All right, but now it's kind of stabilizing. Share value has also grown strongly. Their profit trend is also very strong. But the year 2026 has not ended yet. This actually shows that assets has actually grown. Assets scope has actually grown massively. Over the last 5 years. All right. So on that question you need to ask yourself, before you invest is, will this be sustainable over the years? Now, this is everything I have to talk about asset scope fundamental analysis. Make sure before you do any investment, always make sure to do your due diligence. So that is exactly what investment is all about. But for 2026, we are still entering the year, so we still have to give it some time, before we can decide exactly what's going to happen maybe at the end of the year. So if you found this video helpful, remember to like this video, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that whenever I drop any video, you'll be the first to be notified. Thank you, and I will see you again in the next video.